This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Well, today marks 101 days of Donald Trump's presidency, and to celebrate the 100-day milestone, the US president busted out his iconic dance moves at a rally in Michigan. He's still got it, and since he's been back in power, well, just how fair has the mainstream media's coverage of Donald Trump been? Now, of course, he needs to be and should be scrutinised for every interview or every big decision that he makes. But the stats show that the mainstream media is still suffering from severe TDS. 92% of the major network media coverage throughout the first 100 days of Trump's second term has been negative. That is according to data compiled by the Media Research Centre. 92% negative. Now, that report looked at the coverage across ABC, CBS and NBC. And what was their coverage of Joe Biden like? Well, according to the report, it was 59% positive. But who is surprised by that? It's not just the mainstream media, as we know, that's still holding on tightly to this anti-Trump narrative. In the last 100 days, we've witnessed some extraordinary meltdowns from lefties and celebrities, too many to count. But here are some of my favourites, starting with Rosie O'Donnell, who actually fled the country because of Donald Trump.
Some people entertain the idea of moving abroad after the 2024 election. You actually did it. Tell us about your experience so far, and do you have any regrets?
I have no regrets. Not a day has gone by that I thought it was the wrong decision. I was welcomed with open arms. I knew after reading Project 2025 that if Trump got in, it was time for me and my non-binary child to leave the country. And although I was not one of the celebrities who announced that that's what I would do, I made the decision within my family and my therapist. And should he win, and then when he did, we made the plan into action, and we were gone before he was inaugurated.
Yeah, bye-bye, Rosie. And there's Hollywood actress Selena Gomez, who broke down inside her mansion over illegal immigrants being deported.
Just wanted to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked. The children. They don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything. I promise.
And we have to give a special shout out to the women of The View, where every panellist has made anti-Trump comments ranging from stupid to completely unhinged. Here is Whoopi Goldberg, ever so eloquent in her assessment of the President of the United States.
We are very fickle in this country. We forget, you know, you can be mad at one side or the other, but you have to stick with facts. And the facts are, we left good stuff, he has pooped on it.
So gross. Is CNN's coverage any better? Well, this week it was revealed that the network's ratings are tanking, with its primetime ratings dipping below 500,000 viewers. And really, when you look at CNN's coverage, the only panellist on that network that brings some balance and common sense is Scott Jennings. And he recently called out lies that were being spun when it comes to the MS-13 gang member who was deported back to his home country of El Salvador.
One of the issues that Donald Trump is really under the water, probably his worst issue, is the Maryland man who is in El Salvador right now. It's something that...
Maryland man?
He is a Maryland man.
Come on.
What I will tell you is...
He is an El Salvadoran citizen. He is not a Maryland man. He is an illegal immigrant living in this country illegally for 14 years.
You can say whatever you want to say, Scott, but the American people...
This is why the polling is the way it is, because we're lying. We're lying.
We're not lying.
Thank you, Scott Jennings. Well, while Trump was celebrating his first 100 days in office, he brought out Scott Jennings on stage with him at the rally in Michigan and didn't miss the opportunity to take aim at CNN.
This guy, really, I've watched it for years. I don't know him, but he likes Trump. Come here, Scott. Oh, CNN, this is the end of Scott. No, who cares? Don't worry, we'll take care of you, Scott. Scott Jennings, really great.
Thank you. Michigan. We were flying in here today, and I said, look at these farms. I got to get a farm in Michigan, because when you own as many libs as I do, you got to put a place to put them all. Thank you all very much.
So Donald Trump, he has passed the first 100-day mark of his second term, and he has not slowed down for a second in putting America first, making it safer, closing the border, and being far more transparent than really any other politician. Now, during the past 100 days, what have the Democrats been doing? Flying to El Salvador to rescue an MS-13 gang member, torching Teslas, and taking to the streets to protest against DOJ from cutting waste. They have been utterly pathetic. And who's going to be leading the party? Well, in all seriousness, it could be this bright spark, Tampon Tim, who today claimed that Kamala Harris picked him as her running mate because he could talk code with white guys.
Improve people's lives. But I also was on the ticket, quite honestly, you know, because I could code talk to white guys watching football, fixing their truck, doing that I could put them at ease. I was the permission structure to say, look, you can do this and vote for this. And you look across those swing states, with the exception of Minnesota, we didn't get enough of those votes.
And to think that he could have been vice president over the brilliant J.D. Vance. My goodness. Now, for the 47th president of the United States, who just passed the 100-day mark, well, he's just getting started.
Completed what many consider to be the most successful first 100 days of any administration in the history of our country, and we're just getting started. Things are happening that are amazing, and I would not say it if it weren't fact.
Joining us now is Josh Hammer, Senior Editor-at-Large at Newsweek. Josh, great to speak to you. Donald Trump has celebrated 100 days back in office with a rally in Michigan, and he sat down with an interview on ABC News where he absolutely roasted the journalists. And before we get into that, which you don't want to miss, Josh, what are your reflections on Trump's 100 days? He, of course, made a lot of promises before coming back into power. He's been criticised non-stop about being chaotic and unpredictable. But really, when you compare him to leaders that we have in the world at the moment and leaders we've had in the past, such as his predecessor, how would you assess Trump and his first 100 days?
Gabrielle, it's the fastest 100 days in presidential history. I mean, this is the entire Elon Musk notion of move fast and break things taken to the nth degree and implemented in presidential form. I mean, what we've seen from Donald Trump thus far is indicative of a man who was president and then was out in the political wilderness for 4 years, someone who was prosecuted in unprecedented fashion in 4 different jurisdictions, almost went to jail, was almost assassinated, came within millimeters of losing his life before a global stage, and someone who had this grand realization that, oh my God, I'm going to be back into power and I don't have a moment's time to waste. So that has clearly been his mentality since day one. He also looks like he's enjoying it. I mean, he makes a lot of jokes. He's laughing. He's having a good time out there. Because, again, I think this is someone who genuinely realized that he came within millimeters of dying, and he's now making the most of it. So, look, when it comes to the actual substantive issues there on immigration, I think he gets an A+. That is his signature issue. He has delivered and then some. When it comes to the deportation operations, when it comes to the fact that border crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border have decreased by 95%. I mean, that's an astonishing statistic, 95% there. Now, there are still some irons to be worked out there. So the judicial insurrection, as I call it, is a really, really, really big deal. And unless Congress and the president find some way to deal with these rogue lower court judges, those judges could easily find a way to derail this entire agenda. The tariffs, the trade, it remains to be seen. I mean, it's very much a live ball. It's a jump ball. It's up in the air. We'll see ultimately what happens with it there. But as of now, I think Americans are not necessarily wrong for souring a little bit on their perceptions of the economy. After all, the stock market has been volatile at best and negative at worst for a few weeks now. But again, it's still too early on that front. I happen to be a fan of Donald Trump's trade war against communist China in particular there, and we'll see what happens. But for now, I am overall quite deeply pleased with what I've seen looking at the grand overall picture.
And Josh, thank you for bringing up his assassination attempt, because that is something that the mainstream media would like to forget, that it wasn't all that long ago that he was shot at on stage, and the course of history could have changed very quickly. Look, Trump sat down for an interview on ABC News, which was, of course, an opportunity for the journalist Terry Moran to ask a couple of gotcha questions. And, you know, that's their game, right? They're trying to get him. Well, good luck when you're dealing with, obviously, the most powerful man in the world, but someone who knows the media game better than anyone. And here is Donald Trump calling out the reporter's question about having confidence in his Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth.
And I think he's going to be a very good defense, hopefully a great defense secretary, but he'll be a very good defense secretary.
You have 100% confidence in Pete
I don't have 100% confidence in anything. Okay, anything. Do I have 100%? It's a stupid question. Look,
it's a pretty important position.
No. You don't have 100%. Only a liar would say I have 100% confidence. I don't have 100% confidence that we're going to finish this interview.
The interview is just so awkward for journalist Terry Moran. The president ends up lecturing him about the network he works for.
Do you think the reputation of the United States has gone down under your presidency?
No, I think it's gone way up, and I think we're a respected country again. We were laughed at all over the world. We had a president that couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, couldn't walk down a flight of stairs, couldn't walk across a stage without falling. We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news.
All right. Thank you.
And by the way, ABC is one of the worst, I have to be honest with you.
You know, I mentioned in my editorial that the coverage of Trump's first 100 days has been 92% negative by the mainstream media, and I think Donald Trump has every right to call it out.
Well, you know, elsewhere in that interview with Terry Moran of ABC News, Donald Trump literally tells him that he picked him to do this interview in the Oval Office because he never heard of him. He was like, I never heard of you. I figured it's worth a shot. I mean, how bad can it possibly be? And, you know, I mean, this rally in Michigan that he held for his 100th-day rally, I watched pretty much the entire thing there. I mean, I'm reminded when I watch these lengthy Trump rallies, Gabriella, whether it's on the campaign trail, whether it's celebrating 100 days, whether it's at the convention last year, he is so funny. I have been saying this for years and years. One of Donald Trump's most underappreciated political gifts is that he is a very, very funny man. And he calls it like he sees it. Everyone knows that Donald Trump is Donnie from Queens. He's the guy from the outer borough, from across the river from Manhattan there, who is deeply in touch, despite the fact that he has been wealthy essentially his entire life. He is deeply in touch with the median American who doesn't care for any kind of fluff and just wants to call it like they see it there. The median American is sick of the fact that media gatekeepers for decades and decades continue to distort and to obfuscate and to try to frame their stories in a way that is beneficial to their own parochial interests, even if it goes against the interests of the American common good there. Donald Trump has no interest in playing these games whatsoever. And frankly, the fact that he is just so funny and humorous about it there, it is frankly in many ways the gift that keeps on giving. I think back also, I mean, as far back as the 2016 campaign, that's probably one of the reasons that he actually beat Hillary Clinton back then too, because Hillary Clinton was very, very, very unfunny. She was the opposite of funny. She was deeply serious.
And that has not changed.
No, that has not changed at all. She was deeply unfunny, deeply serious, and frankly, a profoundly unlikable way. And then when you had Donald Trump side by side with her, just making all these jokes and just trying to speak to blue-collar six-pack Joe out of Oklahoma or Colorado there, that contrast has always been a tremendous political gift and a benefit for Donald Trump's political fortunes.
100%, and he never misses. Now, former First Lady Michelle Obama has essentially called the Trump administration racist and claimed that the deportations of illegal immigrants who came to America illegally are being carried out due to skin colour. Now, she went on to say on this podcast episode with Jay Shetty that these deportations are keeping her up at night. Let's take a listen.
My fears are for what I know is happening out there in streets all over the city. And now that we have leadership that is sort of indiscriminately determining who belongs and who doesn't, and we know that those decisions aren't being made with courts and with due process, and, you know, that it's being made like this cop that pulled my brother over when he was 12. You don't look like somebody that belongs. You know, I can determine just by looking at you that you're a good person or you're not a good person. And knowing that there's so much bias and so much racism and so much ignorance that fuels those kind of choices.
You know, isn't it interesting that Michelle Obama failed to mention that her husband Barack Obama deported more people than any other president, kicking out 3 million people in 8 years, but that never seemed to keep her up at night?
Yeah, they call Barack Obama the deporter in chief, actually, his left-wing critics who were trying to get the better of him on that particular issue. So, you know, Michelle Obama has nothing if not a short memory, it seems. But I mean, she's saying here that this deportation operation, the whole Tom Homan, round up all the illegals, kick them out thing is keeping her up at night. Do you know what's actually keeping American citizens up at night? When people like Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia, are brutally murdered by an illegal alien who was previously deported and then was let back in this country. The American people are staying up at night due to the fact that there are MS-13 Trendiaragua thugs, rapists, murderers, gangbangers proliferating with increasing frequency or outright ubiquity all throughout these United States due to the abhorrent policies, to an extent, of her husband Barack Obama, to a much greater extent, frankly, to Barack Obama's old running mate, the former President Joe Biden, who just let in 8 to 10 million illegal aliens based on some counts there. The American people have no interest in this. You can look at opinion poll after opinion poll after opinion poll. It's actually remarkable, Gabrielle, just how much the American people have shifted on this issue. This is actually one of my favorite polling statistics. I go back to the second Barack Obama term, speaking of the Obama family. Back then, around 2013, 2014, give or take, it was roughly 1/3 of Americans, 35%, that told pollsters they supported the deportation of all illegal aliens in this country. Fast forward now to the year 2025. That number is between 60 and 65%. It is almost doubled. The American people have come around to Donald Trump's position on the mass deportation issue. Donald Trump, frankly, deserves a lot of credit for that, actually. He's been single-handedly responsible, I think, for shifting the American electorate when it comes to their stance on this. But this is yet another example as to how Barack and Michelle Obama, who have their fancy place in Martha's Vineyard, I know because I've seen it with my own eyes. They have their fancy place in Martha's Vineyard. They have their God knows how much money, fortune, Netflix contract there. These people are just woefully out of touch. They have learned precisely zero lessons, Gabriella. Zero lessons.
Absolutely.
They have learned from getting schlacked the way they did in 2024. I'm not entirely sure what it will take to wake them up out of their own stupor. I'm just very happy, frankly, that it is not my problem to figure that out.
I know. When you assess Trump's last 100 days, you look at the Democrats' last 100 days, and it's been utterly pathetic. Let's talk about Harvard. Harvard has quietly renamed its Office for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging to the Office of Community and Campus Life. Now, the change was announced this week in an email to the campus community from the head of what had been the Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging, and it comes just hours after going head-to-head with the Trump administration in court over more than $2 billion in frozen funding. Has Harvard caved here? Are we seeing DEI dying, or are we going to see these woke practices still exist but just under a different name?
Unfortunately, Gabriella, I think that it is very much the latter. And this is a very, very common trend. This is not just Harvard that does this. All sorts of corporations throughout America are doing this as well. Look, Donald Trump signed one of the most impactful executive orders in American history with his week 1 executive order to essentially ban DEI, not just in the federal government, but also throughout private sector America. And the reason that he signed this is because DEI, insofar as it amounts to anti-white, anti-Asian, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, and so forth discrimination, is in violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 here in the United States there. But a lot of these companies, a lot of these universities are, as you implied, doing the exact same thing. They're basically just reshuffling the deck and calling it something slightly more anodyne sounding, something slightly more mellifluous, a little more pleasant, pleasing to the ears there. But as it pertains to Harvard, it's actually doubly, triply, or dare I say quadruply laughable and outright farcical, and I'll tell you why. Because at the same time that Harvard University made a big stink out of releasing this 300-plus page report, whatever it is, on the horrors of on-campus anti-Semitism since October 7th, the exact same week they did this, they have doubled down on their lawsuit against the Trump administration. So they're basically suing the Trump administration at the same time for having the temerity to threaten to withhold billions of dollars in funding for, you guessed it, for Harvard's refusal to abide by the Civil Rights Act. So they're, on the one hand, they're saying that anti-Semitism is bad. On the other hand, they're saying you, the taxpayer, still owe us $2+ billion while we can get away with not actually following the Civil Rights Act there. So, I mean, these people are just such unbelievably scathing hypocrites there. And Harvard has clearly not learned a darn thing.
No.
They absolutely enjoy being the tip of the spear of the anti-Trump resistance. I actually have a hot off the press new op-ed for The Telegraph, the British paper, calling Harvard Hamas-occupied territory. So, I mean, Harvard is in really deep doo-doo right now, and I frankly am personally very much cheering on the Trump administration as they continue to seek to level the playing field there at Harvard University.
Well, you're not alone there. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's wife has let it slip apparently classified information that fewer than 24 hostages are left alive in Gaza. This has, of course, sparked outrage among hostages' families. This was overheard at a meeting marking the country's Memorial Day for fallen soldiers and victims of militant attacks. Let's take a listen.
ויש לנו עוד, כמובן, עוד משימה חשובה, לא רק לנצח, אלא גם להחזיר הביתה. נשארו לנו, עד היום החזרנו 196 מחטופינו, 147 בחיים. יש עד 24 חיים, עד 24 חיים. אני אומר עד, והיתר כמובן לצערנו לא בחיים.
You know, this is just so heartbreaking to hear. We know that Netanyahu has vowed to return all of the hostages, but it has been more than 570 days now.
It's been a very long time. This is a tragic story, obviously. It's just an awful situation. I mean, everything about this story is awful. I mean, what happened on October 7th is absolutely appalling. The world's reaction to October 7th is appalling. The fact that there are still hostages still there rotting with Hamas is absolutely appalling there. I mean, I'm hardly surprised that there are apparently fewer than 24 alive. I hate to say it, but I probably would have guessed actually even fewer than that, because as you said, this is a very, very long time. And you look at the hostages who have gotten out in these prisoner swaps, and they essentially look like Holocaust survivors. I mean, they look very gaunt and skinny. They're clearly malnourished. Their skin is very pale because they've barely seen any sunlight, because they've been in these subterranean terror tunnels for the past year and a half, coming up, I guess, in a few months, almost on 2 years now at that point there. Look, I mean, Israel has no choice but to finish the job in Gaza, Gabrielle. There is simply no alternative here. Donald Trump has essentially told Netanyahu to do that there. So I, for one, am personally waiting for Netanyahu to really just go in full barrels blazing. The problem for Israel is that Israel has kind of cut off their nose to spite their face a little bit when they announced at the very onset of the hostilities a year and a half ago. They announced that there are two war aims in this conflict. One is the eradication of Hamas. The other, to get back to what we were just watching here, is the retrieval of all the hostages. And look, I don't want to sound callous or cold-hearted, but the point that I've been making since the war started is that of these two military objectives for the future of the state of Israel, one is more important than the other. Hamas has to go. Hamas has to go. And to the extent that Israel, a year and a half into this war, is continuing to hamstring its own military operations while the president of the United States, Donald Trump, is basically telling Bibi, go, 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 I wonder whether or not that is actually the best strategy, frankly. So I'm waiting for the IDF and Netanyahu to really kind of turn up the heat. But at this point, Hamas has largely, I mean, truly largely over the top been decimated there, but they are still in operational control in Gaza. And when this war is over, that cannot be the case, because if Hamas remains in operational control in Gaza when this war is over, that means that by definition, Israel will have lost the war.
Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Joining us now is Professor Joe Siracusa, Dean of Global Futures at Curtin University. Joe Siracusa, thank you for joining us. The US and Ukraine have now signed this minerals deal and agreed to a joint investment fund. The US Treasury Secretary announced the critical minerals deal, saying that it symbolises a commitment to peace in Ukraine, and the deal will allow America to access Ukrainian resources in return for military aid to Ukraine. Here is US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Thanks to President Trump's tireless efforts to secure a lasting peace, I am glad to announce the signing of today's historic economic partnership agreement between the United States and Ukraine, establishing the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This partnership allows the United States to invest alongside Ukraine to unlock Ukraine's growth assets, mobilize American talent, capital and governance standards that will improve Ukraine's investment climate and accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery.
So, Joe, after resisting, has Zelensky caved here? And what does this mean for the war in Ukraine? Has it increased the chances of a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire before June?
Yeah, I do. I think the ceasefire is going to hold because, well, I mean, during my time and during the Vietnam War, it took 5 years for the ceasefire to take effect. In the meantime, thousands of people died, so there are no promises there. But look, this is Zelensky's way of getting the Trump administration to play the game. And look, as your viewers may or may not know, this idea of an joint investment fund was Zelensky's last September. Before the election, and he put it to Trump that America can share. Of course, he was trying to drag Trump in. At that time, Trump liked the idea. He thought that maybe it would pay for what America has ponied up so far for the war. But this new agreement suggests that it's only going to pay for what America puts in after the agreement. So there's some stable source of military arms for Ukraine. And it also sends a signal to Putin and Russia that the United States is going to be a player here. Yeah. Now, the security the United States is providing is implied, Gabriella. It's not explicit. It's implied. And so, but, you know, foreign economic policy is the handmaid of diplomacy. So it's a pretty good move by both sides. And the U.S. needs those rare minerals, and it also is going to have a stake in oil and gas. The United States is going to be cash in on 50% of the profits for the next 10 years. So it's a pretty good deal all around. And it is a way, I think, of stabilizing the situation and signaling to everybody that there is an end to this war.
And we've heard recently Donald Trump express frustration with Russia. What do you make about, what's your assessment, I should say, of his language that appears to have changed in recent days and weeks?
Oh, I don't put much store in his language. Look, Gabriella, we all grew up with police stories. You know, it's good cop, bad cop. You know, Putin, you know, decides to launch an attack on Kiev, and the president says, "Well, that's not a good idea." I mean, look, they're in cahoots together. They're trying to bring this war to an end on Putin's terms. There is no indication here that Zelensky's going to get what he wants. I mean, Putin's going to get what he wants, and that is the neutralization of Ukraine. And Ukraine will not join NATO. There'll be no advanced weapon systems on their border, and you know, they're going to be playing ball with Putin, plus losing Crimea and which is part of the 20% that will go to Russia. So, you know, none of that's going to change. But look, I think once people start talking about a ceasefire, it's very, very hard to stop, and for this reason. No young man in Russia or Ukraine wants to be the last fellow killed in the war. So as soon as they hear the word ceasefire being bandied around, I think everybody cottons to it very quickly.
I want to ask you about the trade war. Donald Trump was pressed about his tariffs on China in a sit-down interview with ABC News, where he was asked about the cost of products skyrocketing. The president insisted that China deserves the 145% tariff on China. Here he is.
145% tariffs on China, and that's basically an embargo.
They deserve it.
It'll raise prices on everything from electronics to clothing to building houses.
You don't know that. You don't know whether or not China's going to eat it.
That's mathematics.
China probably will eat those tariffs, but at 145, they basically can't do much business with the United States. And they were making from us $1 trillion a year. They were ripping us off like nobody's ever ripped us off. And by the way, we have other countries that were just as bad. If you look at the European Union, it was terrible what they've done to us. Every country, almost every country in the world was ripping us off.
Now, China's economy has shown its first signs of economic damage from the trade war as the country's manufacturing activity contracted the most since 2023, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. And China has also released a fiery propaganda video declaring that it will never kneel down to US pressure. Joe, where is the tariffs policy headed?
Well, I'm afraid it's not going to solve a lot of problems. I mean, this will require an intervention at the highest levels by President Xi and President Trump to settle this. Look, Gabriella, tariff wars have a very bad history. 1930s, they were tried to, at the insistence of agriculture in America, to improve American farmers' markets and the like, and none of that happened. It was just the reverse. I mean, tariffs are a policy that has been tried and found wanting. Trump brought it up again because people don't know much about it, and it might have some short-term effects. But in terms of long-term, Chinese aren't going to, they're not going to eat the tariff and play by the rules. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party is playing for its life. Donald Trump is playing for the next 3 years. So do the math.
The odds of a US recession have increased since Trump came to power, and overnight the latest economic growth figures from America bear that out. Recent GDP figures indicate that the US economy has contracted for the first time in 3 years, and Donald Trump has attributed the economic downturn to his predecessor Joe Biden, suggesting that the market's poor performance is a reflection of the economic conditions he inherited. Is that fair?
No, not really. You know, Gabriella, when I worked at Merrill Lynch back in the day, there were 3 things you had to pay attention to: buy, sell, or hold. And after Trump's first 100 days and his various policies, a lot of investors are very nervous. Consumer confidence has caved in. People are expecting the worst. There are signs of a recession. I think a good stockbroker or hedge fund manager would tell people to sell. I mean, it's not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse. And so Trump is going to have to reverse this. Now, I understand that he's announcing major tax policies, which may be able to help him at the last minute because he's trying to balance the act between what Americans have to pay more and what more they can take home in their pay packets. So that would be good news.
Let's talk about those tax cuts. Donald Trump has said that some people's income taxes will be lowered or even completely eliminated due to tariffs, insisting that the focus will be on people making less than $200,000 a year. He says the number of jobs being created will be a bonanza for America. And last night, Donald Trump renewed his call for Congress to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill and once again deliver the largest tax cuts in history to the American people. Here he is.
In the coming weeks and months, we will pass the largest tax cuts in American history, and that will include no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. It's called the One Big Beautiful Bill, and it will be the biggest bill ever passed in our country's history. It will include the biggest tax cuts, regulation cuts, military supremacy, and just about everything else. We will cut more than $1 trillion in wasteful and unnecessary spending. And in the next fiscal year, it'll all be done. We're going to have something that you won't even believe. We will end inflation, slash prices. We've already ended inflation, raise wages, and give you the greatest economy in the history of the world. That's already happening.
And today, Donald Trump announced plans to offer additional tax cuts to American businesses if they make their products in America.
We cut your taxes from almost 40% down to 21%. Now we're bringing your taxes down from 21% to 15% if you build your product, make your product in the USA. So if you make it in the USA, those chips, those beautiful chips, we'll make those suckers in the USA, and you're going to be all the way down to 15%. And I think there's never been anything like it. So now we're at the lowest scale for a large country, by far the lowest scale.
That's a pretty significant incentive.
Yes, it is. But, manufacturing only accounts for 9% of the American economy. The rest are services, tourism, and students. So, it only helps a certain part. Look, Joe Biden was going to pay for everything by soaking people who made over $400,000. Trump says he's going to try to give relief to people earning less than $200,000. I like the idea of eliminating the tax on overtime and on tips and the like because, Gabriella, one of America's great shames is the minimum wage. It's federal minimum wage is $7.25. When I was a kid a long time ago, it was $1.25. So a lot of people working for peanuts, so they count on those tips and the like. And also, it's big news for all these millions of Americans who are into Social Security, their pension program. There's going to no longer be a tax on Social Security. So he's offering at the other end a lot of very positive things, and I'm glad he's doing this. I mean, Trump is now being a businessman. He's offering people at the one end a great deal of relief, and he's offering incentives at the other end. Now, if someone wanted to manufacture something in America instead of Costa Rica tomorrow, it'd take them about 9 years to get it up. Keep in mind, it takes 12 years to grow an olive. I mean, it's not something you can do overnight. So he might be overselling that. But look, I think the tax relief that he's providing, and he's going to get this passed in the House and the Senate, might be able to offset the tactics and what's happening with tariffs. One poll that I saw over the weekend, I think it was the New York Siena poll, said that Americans are afraid. That is, they were scared of what Trump was doing because they didn't understand it. And, sometimes I look at Trump's advisors. I'm not sure, Gabriella, they understand what they're doing exactly. Sometimes they just roll the dice and see what happens.
Fair enough. Dean of Global Futures at Curtin University, Professor Joe Siracusa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining us now from Vancouver is broadcaster and commentator Anita Krishna. Anita, thank you for joining us on Power Hour. Mark Carney has won Canada's federal election, securing a fourth term for the Liberal Party, and with almost all votes counted, results show that Liberals are on 168 electoral districts, followed by the Conservatives with 144. And it was certainly a turnaround. Just 3 months ago, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre looked certain to sweep the polls, and he's now lost his seat in the Ontario district of Carleton to Liberal Bruce Fanjoy. Let's look at Mark Carney, who took over from Justin Trudeau when he resigned. Here he is insisting that he's going to bring climate change to the heart of every financial decision.
You demanded action, and now it's time for the financial sector to deliver. To reach net zero, every country, every company, every bank, every investor, every pension fund around the world will need to make some big changes. In the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow, we have an enormous opportunity to bring climate change into the heart of every financial decision.
Anita, what is Canada going to get with Mark Carney?
I don't think we even wanted him. And I think we're just going to get nothing but illusions. I mean, it was very true that everybody was absolutely fed up with Trudeau. We were ready to get rid of him. And Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives had this amazing lead. They had riled up the country. There was such a groundswell of support. And then very secretly, well, not secretly, but Trudeau just kind of passed the baton to this man. And this man came in and just clinched it and cinched it. And he did a lot of sort of sneaky, underhanded things that the mainstream media here didn't report on. And this managed to just gloss over all these things, all the things about net zero, all his history to get him elected. It was staggering. And it was also the fear of Trump that really sealed the deal for his win.
It's interesting, and I want to get into Trump's effect in a moment, but just on Mark Carney's record, he's gone on television pushing for taxes on flying due to climate change. Here he is.
But shouldn't we be flying less now?
We should be taking into account the impact of our flying on the planet now. And that's
pushing up the tax on flying.
You push up the tax on flying, you push up the cost on transport, and that's in part what putting a price on carbon is.
So do Canadians know what they've signed up for?
I do not think that Canadians understand what we've signed up for. And earlier you played the clip of him at COP24, and he basically says, I mean, Michael Bloomberg is part of, it's on Bloomberg TV, right? But basically COP24 is the, COP26 rather, UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, where he was saying there will be punishments to financial institutions if the emissions of their clients are not up to snuff in a way. They want to do everything to keep oil in the ground, coal not burning. They're not for pipelines. They're not for oil and gas. They're for all electric. And that is never spoken about in the mainstream media. I mean, he literally is a net zero zealot. And you think, well, what are you hoping to accomplish? By 2050, he wants us to be in a net zero world. Does that mean you don't drive a car? You don't fly in a plane? You don't heat your home? You don't have a hot shower? I mean, all these basic things, these are never spoken about in the media, but these are are his beliefs. And these beliefs, I believe, are for him to gain such massive control, because he has control over world banks, leaders. I mean, you put these stipulations on these financial institutions because you punish them for their emissions, and you are in power. I mean, he's a very powerful person. And do we really think that he gave everything up? He left, Brookfield Asset Management, which is like a BlackRock, to give everything up to come and save Canada? If Canadians can't see that he's an installation, then the wool is just completely being pulled over their eyes. And I think that that's exactly what's happened. The wool was pulled over their eyes. He was, touted as this financial genius, this, former banker, this, he was a former banker, the governor of England, the bank, the governor of the Bank of Canada. But he is really a complete climate activist, but only not for good gain. It's not like he really believes in this. He has no problem buying a pipeline in the UAE or in South America, but he will shut down Canadian pipelines. He had totally approved of killing the Northern Gateway pipeline, but yet he'll buy a pipeline somewhere else. He's all for this bill 69, which is a known, and he will not repeal that, which means that we cannot cultivate our oil and gas in Canada. He's a man that claims to want to, he'll fix all the problems with Trump. But really, Canadian jobs, Canadian oil, we have suffered under the Liberals. And I don't think that Canadians understand just what they've elected. He touts himself as a climate activist, that net zero is going to protect the world. Why will it protect the world? We're in Canada. Half our country is all wilderness. I live in a rainforest. The world has gotten greener since. The carbon is good for the planet, but he has guilted a nation, guilted the world into thinking that climate is bad, carbon is bad, but you need carbon.
And you mentioned the media bias. It's, of course, everywhere. Canada appears to be no exception. We were just having a look this morning. Here's a journalist from the CBC asking Conservative Pierre Poilievre if he would actually step aside and not compete.
Do you believe the government's promise of $155 billion in counter tariffs is enough? And what would you do differently to get the president to change course? And to clarify your last question, are you saying that you would step aside and not compete for the head of the country to allow us to get through this crisis? Or I'm unclear about your answer to the last question.
Well, I find it a strange question. Your CBC is asking me to step aside in the next election. It's a very strange request. No, we're not going to suspend democracy. The Canadian people run this country, and they will choose the next Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to get a bit more of your assessment of the media bias that just appears to be everywhere, even in Canada, and also the role that the media played in pushing this anti-Trump narrative. I suppose, what role did Donald Trump play in this election?
I believe that Donald Trump played a massive role. I mean, his chiding, his teasing us. He was teasing us. He was obviously teasing Trudeau. He didn't take him seriously at all if he's sitting there calling him the governor. He was just sort of shaking the sheets of Canada that need to be shook, right? Basically, he started to threaten with the tariffs because he wanted us to clean up our borders because of fentanyl getting through. And he's absolutely right. We don't check our ports. We don't check our borders. We don't have the infrastructure in place or the manpower in place. And so a lot gets through. And in the media, they had said it's only 1%. It's only 1%. Well, it's only 1% that's caught. We really need a lot more checks and balances. We have massive fentanyl drug labs up here. And so Trump was right. And so, but people started to take this as a complete attack on our sovereignty, what turned out just to be teasing from Trump. If you don't understand Trump, that he's a teaser, that he's having a bit of fun, and you lose your mind over it, that's a big problem. And the media absolutely propelled that, because the media is so good at fear. We're so good at COVID fear, and we were so good at making Trump the big bad wolf. And Carney was going to come in and save the day. He was the only one that could save us from the big bad wolf. And then the thing is, he never went and talked to Trump. He still hasn't really spoken to Trump face to face.
Oh, look, well said. Before we move on from Mark Carney, here's a clip of him dancing at an after party following his election victory. Want to know what your thoughts are? He's not being elected because of his dance moves. He's being compared to failed vice presidential candidate Tim Walz there. What do you make of it?
Oh, well, what catches my attention is his wife, Diana Fox Carney, with her elbows up. That was their big thing. Get your elbows up. And it's like a cross between that and doing some sort of bizarre chicken dance. You know, it is very cringeworthy. I mean, I don't know if you saw, he came and did commercials with promos with Mike Myers. Get your elbows up, and that was their big thing. You know, fight, fight, fight. We've got a crisis. Everybody, and so everybody is doing this. You know, and it's utterly ridiculous. But I do feel very sad that Poilievre didn't make it in. I mean, it was a 2-horse race, and he was the horse that I wanted. You know, he was similar to Trump, but that he made sense. And because there was such a massive Canadian backlash to Trump, that kind of just sunk it for him. And it seemed out of his control. And of course, the media does not support him because Poilievre said, I will defund the CBC. The CBC gets $1.2 billion of Canadian tax money every year. They don't turn a profit. They don't even put comments open on their YouTube channel. They purport to report for Canadians, but they really step all over the face of Canadians, and they're completely biased. And Carney came around and he said, I'm going to not only give you that, but I'm going to give you $150 million more dollars, and I'm actually going to make it statutory that there can be no changes to CBC funding unless it passes Parliament. That's how much he is sucking up to CBC, and CBC, by golly, they wanted him to get in, and they did everything they could to just smear Pierre, which was totally unfortunate because a lot of us believe his campaign was from the heart, and we wanted change. Yeah.
Anita, finally, I just want to talk to you once again about climate change, seeing as Canada has a big focus on it. And this week's blackout across Spain and Portugal were caused by an outage on a grid mostly powered by wind and solar. Energy experts had been warning that Spain and Portugal's growing reliance on renewables left their grids vulnerable to major blackouts. I mean, were you surprised?
Oh, this is a crazy story. I think they changed their power grids, and I think it was between 50 or 80% went to this new renewable energy. And look what happened. People were in blackouts. People were stuck in elevators. You imagine you have a power outage in the hospital, and then the press, the media, once again released headlines saying, no, it's not likely that it was the renewable energy source. Well, what else was it? I mean, more testing has to be done. And this absolute fanaticism of not using oil and gas and traditional power resources is not working. And, you know, you can maybe use a bit of solar in Spain because they have a lot of sun. You cannot use solar in Canada. We just don't have enough sun for that. And to have ridiculous wind turbines going, it's a major environmental waste, but they don't sell it that way. And it's just so sad to see this immense blackout in Spain. It just must have been horrible for people.
Absolutely.
You know, it's obviously not working.
No, absolutely not, and we're seeing that play out. But you know, good luck, Canada. That's all I have to say. Broadcaster and commentator Anita Krishna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gabriella.
Prince William is reportedly formulating a plan to finally strip Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their HRH titles. Riley Sullivan is a lifestyle reporter here at skynews.com.au, and he's always across the latest celebrity headlines. Riley, great to see you.
Great to be here.
Prince William, he's reportedly furious after it emerged that Meghan Markle is still using her HRH title despite agreeing to drop the title when the Sussexes left royal duties. How is Will planning to deal with this?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think Meghan Markle has been very brazen recently with the use of the HRH. Now, royal fans will know in 2020, during the negotiations for Harry and Meghan to leave royal duties, it was agreed with Queen Elizabeth that they will not use the HRH title. That is a long-standing precedent, and there's good reason for it. Basically, the HRH is only given to working royals and senior members of the royal family because it denotes a level of I guess, respect in the public, and also it's not a financial thing. Working royals do not profit. They do not use their names to make money. It's an honour to have an HRH.
Absolutely.
So the fact that she's continued to use this HRH when they've been instructed not to, I think is absolutely infuriating in Buckingham Palace. And there was a very interesting source inside, close to the Prince of Wales, who spoke to the Daily Beast. He said that William is furious, unsurprisingly, and he's also already formulating plans to deal with this when he becomes monarch. I think that he feels that King Charles, God bless him, is in poor health at the moment, has other priorities, and I think that Will feels that this has just gotten out of hand, and we need to take a tougher line, basically, in the family against Harry and Meghan. So I think the understanding is that when he becomes monarch, they will be formally stripped of the HRH.
And I'm sure Prince William has a lot of support for that from the public.
Absolutely.
Now, Prince William and Princess Catherine have celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary during a break in Scotland. Look, I can't believe it's been 14 years.
Me
but
neither.
That must have been very special.
Oh, absolutely. And Scotland is special for them. One, because this is where they met. They were at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. So it's sentimental for them. And they were there for a 2-day visit, and they visited the Isle of Mull. And this was a place on the Scottish coast where they did go when they were first dating. I don't even know if they were dating yet. I think they were just friends at that point.
Right.
So it's very special and very sentimental, and yeah, just lovely. But as you said, it's can't believe it's been 14 years since that amazing royal wedding at Westminster Abbey.
Wasn't it incredible? I know, bring back so many memories. Everyone here in
Mm.
Australia was celebrating or hosting their own royal wedding parties to mark the occasion. But 14 years, it's great to see them going strong. Prince Andrew, he's facing more controversy after the BBC revealed fresh revelations about Andrew's financial dealings. What was the biggest takeaway from the BBC report?
Yes, so this was a report that appeared in the BBC earlier this week, and it was basically to do with Pitchett Palace, which was, as royal sort of watchers will probably remember, Pitchett Palace was is almost like a Shark Tank style show, but it wasn't a show, it was a presentation at the palace where Prince Andrew would basically invite investors to meet with young entrepreneurs and business people, and it was sort of an opportunity to network. So, I think it was something at the time that was considered quite a positive thing that Andrew was doing as a working royal, and he sort of had these contacts that he gleaned from that role, and it was valuable in a way, and it was, I guess, his personal, venture. And so after he was stripped, or I should say stepped back from royal life after the notorious Newsnight interview, the ownership of that Pitchett Palace kind of venture was transferred to a man named Doug Barrowman, who is a very high-profile British millionaire and quite controversial because there's been allegedly allegations that he was involved in perhaps some kind of tax avoidance schemes. So quite a controversial figure at the moment. But basically the takeaway from this whole thing is that Andrew's finances are murky. It's very unclear where his wealth is coming from. How is he funding Royal Lodge? Like, we know that King Charles is not paying for the property. So they've managed to hang in there. We've been talking about it on this show now for over a year. They haven't been evicted. They've managed to stay there. So they are funding it. And we know that it's multi-million pounds every year to pay for that property. So it's very unclear, but I've heard from a source, which I can't really go too much into, that there's a lot more to come about Andrew's finances. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, looking forward to hearing more, Riley. Now, heartbreaking new details have emerged about the shocking death of Prince Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah.
What have former neighbours and friends had to say about her passing?
Look, this is just such a tragic case. Virginia Giuffre she showed so much bravery in her life. Absolutely. She spoke out against Jeffrey Epstein and I guess Prince Andrew and the British establishment in a way, which took amazing courage and bravery. And I think people don't credit her. I think people focus on the financial aspect of her deal with Prince Andrew and the settlement. But, her bravery and her coming forward, that inspired other people who were victims of Jeffrey Epstein and these awful people to come forward. And I think that she was a very courageous person. And it's so sad to know that, she's taken her own life. In Australia, of all places, Australia was a haven for her. She came here with her husband, Robert Giuffre, after she escaped, the clutches of Epstein, and this was her haven. She rebuilt her life here. She lived at times in Queensland, in New South Wales, and finally in Western Australia. And friends and neighbours have talked about, what an amazing woman she was. She changed her name. They knew her under different names. One of them was Jenna. And she was a normal mum. She was just a person that was, had gone through these sort of awful and dark and kind of extraordinary circumstances, and she really rallied. So it's absolutely heartbreaking. There was a note that allegedly Virginia wrote that her sister-in-law has released, and it kind of just was somber. It said, you know, it talked about fighting for women, fighting for victims of trafficking. And I hope that's her legacy, and I hope that people don't take this path of conspiracy, because at the end of the day, she was a brave woman who lived in very kind of exceptional circumstances.
Absolutely, and she should be remembered for her courage and her bravery and the devastating news coming out of Australia. Finally, King Charles has opened up about his cancer diagnosis, saying that it can be daunting and at times frightening experiencing for those living with the illness. What else did King Charles have to say?
Yeah, you know, this was a really heartwarming speech by the King. It was really interesting language, you know, to have a monarch talking about, he said he feels like he became a statistic because, you know, cancer touches the lives of almost everyone at some point, you know, whether personally or through family and friends. And he described himself in that way. And I thought that was very interesting language to have a monarch, which, you know, traditionally is this person who is on a very kind of, you know, ornamental pedestal. To be talking about being a statistic, I thought was very kind of interesting language. That's a real change. You know, I don't think Queen Elizabeth would have referred to herself in that kind of context. But it was a very, you know, sad in a way, because he didn't really go into perhaps prognosis or, you know, what stage he's at in his cancer battle, which I think people can make their own conclusions about. But as far as we know, he's in good spirits. The speech was something where he was able to reach out and thank people in the community, cancer sufferers, you know, people in the NHS, people in the healthcare system that have supported him and support others. And he said that really it's the best of humanity when you look at how people look after each other when things like this happen. So
and he's absolutely right.
He is, yeah.
Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.